The encounter. Frank Harrison sat quietly in a corner booth of Rosie's diner, the faded photographs of soldiers and smiling patrons lining the walls resonating with memories of a time when he was young and invincible. Now, at 91, he often found solace in his routine visits to this diner, where he could enjoy a slice of apple pie and share stories of his youth with anyone who cared to listen. But that day was different. As the scent of freshly brewed coffee wafted through the air, a group of bikers burst into the diner, their laughter and loud voices overshadowing the usual chatter. Frank glanced up from his slice of pie, his eyes narrowing at the sight of leather jackets and unruly hair. The lead biker, a tall man with tattoos sprawling across his arms, locked eyes with Frank, a wicked grin spreading across his face. It was a look Frank had seen before, a mix of bravado and malice. "Look at this old-timer," the biker sneered, turning to his friends. "What's he doing here? Shouldn't he be at the retirement home?" The laughter from the group echoed in the diner, drowning out the sounds of clinking silverware and quiet conversations. Frank felt a familiar fire ignite within him, a flame that had been kindled during his years of service. He had faced far worse than the rudeness of a group of punks. He had stood up to enemy fire in Korea and survived harrowing days as a prisoner of war. But today, he felt a surge of protectiveness, not just for himself, but for the other patrons who watched the encounter unfold, their expressions a mix of concern and shock. "Gentlemen," Frank said, his voice steady but firm, "there's no need for that kind of talk. Why don't you find somewhere else to be?" The lead biker's grin faltered for a moment before he regained his bravado. "What are you going to do about it, Grandpa? Go on. Tell us your war stories. I bet they're real thrilling." Frank felt his patience wearing thin. He had encountered bullies like this throughout his life, on the schoolyard, on the battlefield, and everywhere in between. These boys were nothing compared to the trials he had endured. "Son," Frank replied, his voice low and dangerous, "give me back my phone, and we can all go our separate ways." The biker laughed, dangling Frank's phone just out of his reach. "Oh, what's the matter? You think you're tough? Why don't you come over here and take it?" A hush fell over the diner as the tension escalated. Rosie, the diner's owner, had been watching from behind the counter, her hands trembling slightly as she picked up the phone. "Yes, police. There's a situation at my diner. Some bikers are harassing an elderly customer. Please hurry," she said, her voice urgent. Frank's eyes never left the lead biker's face. He could feel the anger bubbling within him, but he also felt the weight of years of discipline and restraint. "You boys have no idea who you're messing with," he said, his voice steady. "I've faced tougher men than you in my sleep." The bikers erupted in laughter, the lead one leaning in closer. "Yeah, right. What's your plan, old man? You going to shuffle home and break a hip?" Frank clenched his fists, determined not to back down. He had spent years learning to fight against the odds, and this moment was no different. "This is your last warning. I'm going to walk into that diner and have my lunch. If you try to stop me, you will regret it." The lead biker's face twisted with rage, and he gestured to his friends. "Get him," he shouted. Before Frank could react, one of the bikers lunged forward, trying to grab him. In that instant, something inside Frank snapped. His years of combat training kicked in, and muscle memory took over. He grabbed the biker's wrist and twisted, using the man's momentum to throw him over his shoulder. The biker hit the ground with a thud, the wind knocked out of him, as his friends stared in shock. "Anyone else want to try their luck?" Frank asked, standing tall in the face of the stunned group. The bikers, who moments before had been laughing, now looked at each other with uncertainty. But their leader was undeterred, his rage simmering beneath the surface. "Get him," he yelled again, and all 5 bikers charged at Frank. What happened next would become legendary in Rosie's diner. Frank moved with a grace that defied his age, ducking, weaving, and striking with precision. He elbowed one biker in the solar plexus, sending him doubling over in pain. Another received a swift kick to the knee, falling to the ground with a cry. The lead biker swung a wild punch at Frank, but he ducked under it, grabbing the biker's arm and using his strength to send him crashing into his friends. In less than a minute, all 5 bikers lay on the ground, groaning in pain and disbelief. Inside the diner, patrons erupted in cheers, their faces lit with admiration and astonishment. Rosie, still on the phone with the police, couldn't believe her eyes. "You won't believe this," she said into the receiver. "Our elderly customer just took down all 5 bikers by himself." Frank walked over to where his phone lay on the ground, brushing it off. He looked at the screen, nodded to himself, and turned back to the bikers, who were slowly getting to their feet, bewildered and the aftermath. As the dust settled from the unexpected confrontation, Frank stood in the parking lot of Rosie's diner, his heart racing, but his resolve unwavering. The bikers, once menacing and brimming with bravado, now lay on the asphalt, nursing their wounds and processing their humiliating defeat at the hands of a 91-year-old veteran. The faces of the diner patrons reflected a mix of disbelief and admiration, the cheers from within the diner echoing in the air. Frank adjusted his veteran's cap and took a deep breath, savoring the moment of triumph. He had not only defended himself, but had also stood up for anyone who had ever been bullied or marginalized. A small part of him felt proud of the spectacle he had just created, and as he glanced around, he noticed a few younger patrons with wide eyes, their expressions a blend of awe and inspiration. Just then, the blaring sirens of police cars pierced the air, cutting through the moment of victory. Frank felt a rush of mixed emotions. He had just defended himself, yet he wondered if his actions would have consequences. Would the police see him as the hero or as a troublemaker? As 2 officers exited their vehicles, they surveyed the scene, their expressions shifting from surprise to caution. Frank knew that they had arrived in response to Rosie's call. He approached them, his back straight and his demeanor calm. "Good afternoon, officers," he said, his voice steady. "I assume you're here about the situation." The younger officer, a wiry man with a fresh haircut, nodded slowly. "Yes, sir. We received a report of a disturbance. Can you explain what happened?" Frank pointed to the bikers, who were now sitting up, their faces a mix of anger and embarrassment. "These gentlemen decided to harass me while I was having lunch. I tried to de-escalate the situation, but they refused to listen." The older officer, a seasoned veteran with graying hair and kind eyes, surveyed the bikers, who were now exchanging looks of regret. "Is that true?" he asked the lead biker. The biker scowled, clearly frustrated by the turn of events. "Yeah, but he didn't have to." "Sir," the older officer interjected, "we're trying to assess the situation here. I suggest you think carefully about your words." He turned back to Frank. "You did well to defend yourself. Is there anything you need from us?" Frank shook his head. "No, I just want to enjoy my lunch in peace. I've fought harder battles than this." He gestured to the diners who were still watching, some filming the event on their phones. "Let them see that standing up to bullies is important." The younger officer scribbled down notes, while the older one continued to listen. After a few moments of silence, he turned to the bikers again. "You all are free to leave, but consider this a warning. Harassment of any kind will not be tolerated." With that, the officers turned to Frank one last time. "Thank you for your service, sir," the older officer said, nodding respectfully before they walked back to their cars. Frank felt a wave of relief wash over him as the bikers grumbled and got back on their bikes, their bravado replaced with defeat. As the roar of the motorcycles faded into the distance, the diner erupted into applause. Frank turned to face the patrons, who were beaming with admiration. He couldn't help but smile, a warm glow spreading through him as he realized the impact of his actions. Rosie rushed over, her eyes shining with gratitude. "Frank, that was incredible. You showed those punks what true courage looks like. I've never seen anything like it. Just doing what any veteran would do." "Rosie," Frank replied, taking a seat back in his booth. You can't let bullies run amok. The other patrons began to gather around him, eager to share their admiration. A young woman with a camera phone stepped forward. "Sir, would you mind if I took a photo? This moment is too epic to let slip away." Frank chuckled softly. "Go ahead, but make sure you capture my good side." He adjusted his cap with a wink, enjoying the camaraderie of the moment. As the flash of the camera went off, he glanced at the diner's clock, realizing it was getting late. He ordered a fresh slice of apple pie and a cup of coffee, savoring the comfort of the familiar meal. Yet, in the back of his mind, he couldn't shake the feeling that his actions today would resonate beyond this diner. After finishing his pie, Frank stood up, and as he did, a boy of about 10 approached him, his eyes wide with admiration. "Sir, can I ask you a question?" "Of course, young man," Frank replied, kneeling down to meet the boy at eye level. "What's on your mind?" "Are you really a hero?" the boy asked, his voice filled with awe. Frank smiled, remembering all the times he had been called a hero throughout his life. "I'm just a man who stood up for what's right. Heroes are those who help others and do the right thing, even when it's hard." The boy nodded, seemingly processing Frank's words. "I want to be brave like you when I grow up." Frank's heart swelled with pride. "You already are brave, just by asking questions and standing up for what you believe in. Remember, courage comes in many forms." As the boy smiled and ran back to his parents, Frank turned to find more patrons gathering around him. An older couple approached, tears in their eyes. "Frank, we can't thank you enough," the woman said, her voice trembling. "What you did today gives us all hope. You've reminded us that it's never too late to stand up for ourselves." Frank felt a lump in his throat. "Thank you for saying that. We all have battles to fight, and sometimes it just takes one person to step up." With each passing moment, the atmosphere in Rosie's diner transformed. It was no longer just a place to eat, but a gathering spot for those inspired by Frank's bravery. People began to share their own stories of standing up to bullies, both big and small, and Frank listened intently, offering words of encouragement and solidarity. But amid the camaraderie, Frank's mind drifted to his grandson, Tommy, who was still at the VA hospital. He wondered if Tommy had heard about the incident yet. A pang of concern filled his heart. Tommy had followed in his footsteps, serving his country with honor. He hoped his grandson would see the bravery in standing up for oneself, regardless of age. As the evening wore on, Frank made his way to the diner's door, ready to head home. Rosie caught up with him, holding a small to-go box. "You can't leave without this, Frank. You've earned a second piece of pie." He chuckled as she handed him the box. "Thank you, Rosie. This means a lot." He opened the door and paused, glancing back at the crowd that had gathered. "Remember," he said, raising his voice, "don't ever let anyone intimidate you. Stand tall and be proud of who you are." With that, he stepped out into the cool evening air, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. As he walked to his car, he couldn't shake the feeling that today was just the beginning. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, and he was ready to face them head-on, just as he had done countless times before. But what he didn't realize was that his actions had sparked a ripple effect in the community, a movement that would inspire many to stand up against bullying and injustice. And in a world where kindness and courage often seemed in short supply, Frank Harrison had reignited the flame of hope. As he drove home, the headlights illuminating the road ahead, Frank's mind wandered back to his military days, to the camaraderie, the brotherhood, and the lessons learned in the heat of battle. He knew that tomorrow would bring its own set of challenges, but he was ready to face them, armed with the knowledge that true courage comes from within. The legacy. The next morning dawned bright and clear, the sun casting a warm golden hue over Frank's small suburban neighborhood. As he sat at his kitchen table, the aroma of fresh coffee filling the air, he found himself replaying the events of the previous day in his mind. The cheers, the camaraderie, and most importantly, the impact he had made on the people around him lingered in his thoughts. It had been a long time since he felt that rush of adrenaline, and while he enjoyed his quiet life, he couldn't help but feel a spark of excitement for the unexpected turn of events. Frank glanced at the wall filled with photographs, portraits of family, friends, and fellow soldiers who had shaped his life. Each frame told a story, a memory etched in time. There was a picture of him in his uniform during the Korean War, youthful and hopeful. Another showed him surrounded by his grandchildren, their smiles bright against the backdrop of a summer picnic. But what caught his eye was a recent picture of Tommy, his grandson, in his scrubs at the VA hospital, proudly holding a certificate of commendation for his service as a nurse. Tommy would be proud, Frank murmured to himself, pouring another cup of coffee. He took a sip, the warmth spreading through him like the memories of old battles fought and won. But deep down, Frank felt a nagging thought. He needed to talk to Tommy about what had happened. His grandson looked up to him, and he wanted to ensure that the lessons learned from yesterday would inspire the next generation. After breakfast, Frank decided to pay Tommy a visit at the VA hospital. He put on his favorite veteran's cap, a silver star pinned prominently on the front. The hat had seen better days, just like him, but it was a symbol of pride and a reminder of the battles he had fought, not just on the battlefield, but in life itself. The drive to the hospital was peaceful, the streets lined with trees that danced gently in the morning breeze. As he parked and walked toward the entrance, he noticed a small group of veterans gathered outside, sharing stories and laughter. Frank smiled at the camaraderie that still existed among them. They were bonded by their shared experiences, having faced adversity and come out stronger on the other side. Entering the hospital, he was greeted by familiar sights and sounds, the hustle and bustle of nurses, the quiet beeping of machines, and the aroma of lunch being prepared in the cafeteria. It was a place of healing, and Frank had spent countless hours here, both as a patient and as a visitor. He approached the nurse's station and inquired about Tommy's whereabouts. "Hey, Mr. Harrison," a nurse named Clara said with a smile. "Your grandson is in the break room. He just finished a shift. He'll be thrilled to see you." "Thank you, Clara," Frank replied, feeling a sense of anticipation. He made his way to the break room, his heart pounding slightly with the excitement of sharing his story. When he entered, he found Tommy sitting at a table, a half-eaten sandwich in front of him. The moment their eyes met, Tommy's face broke into a wide grin. "Grandpa, what a surprise!" He stood up and hugged Frank tightly, a warmth spreading between them that only family could share. "Just thought I'd drop by and see how my favorite nurse is doing," Frank said with a wink, ruffling Tommy's hair playfully. Tommy chuckled and gestured for Frank to sit. "You won't believe how busy it's been. We had a full house yesterday. But enough about work. I heard some stories about you last night that have everyone buzzing." Frank raised an eyebrow, feigning innocence. "Oh, really? What kind of stories?" Tommy leaned in closer, excitement dancing in his eyes. "They said you took down 5 bikers at Rosie's diner. Is it true?" Frank chuckled, trying to downplay the incident. "Well, let's just say I defended myself. They weren't expecting a 91-year-old veteran to fight back." Tommy's expression turned serious. "Grandpa, that's incredible. You're like a superhero. I mean, standing up to bullies like that takes guts, especially at your age." Frank felt a wave of pride wash over him, but he also sensed the weight of responsibility in Tommy's words. "It's not about being a hero, Tommy. It's about standing up for what's right. I've faced bullies all my life, and it doesn't stop when you get older. You have to keep fighting, no matter the odds." Tommy nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I've seen so many veterans struggle with feeling powerless after serving. It's inspiring to see you take a stand like that. You're showing everyone that age doesn't define your strength." Frank leaned back, his heart swelling with pride. "I want you to remember that, Tommy. It's important to stand up for others, to protect those who can't protect themselves. Every generation has its battles, and we need to fight them together." Their conversation continued, weaving through the threads of their lives. Stories of bravery, compassion, and resilience. Frank shared tales of his time in Korea, the friendships he had formed, and the sacrifices made along the way. He spoke of his determination to never give up, no matter how daunting the challenges ahead. As the clock ticked on, Frank felt a renewed sense of purpose. He wanted to take this experience and turn it into something meaningful for the community. Inspired by the energy surrounding the diner after his encounter, he envisioned a gathering, a town hall meeting where veterans, families, and community members could come together to share their stories, to promote unity and strength against bullying and injustice. "Tommy, what do you think about organizing a community event?" Frank asked, his excitement bubbling over. "We could invite veterans and their families, share our stories, and inspire others to stand up against bullying." Tommy's eyes lit up at the suggestion. "That sounds amazing, Grandpa. I think it would really resonate with people. We could even involve local schools and invite students to share their experiences." "Exactly," Frank exclaimed. "We can create a safe space for everyone to speak up and connect. It's important for young people to see that standing up is a collective effort. They need to know they're not alone." "Let's do it," Tommy replied enthusiastically. "I'll talk to the hospital staff and see if we can secure a space. We can get the word out through social media and local news outlets." As they brainstormed ideas for the event, Frank felt invigorated by the thought of bringing people together. He knew that sharing stories could foster empathy and understanding, creating a ripple effect in their community. The diner incident had awakened a sense of purpose within him, and he was determined to keep that momentum alive. After wrapping up their discussion, Frank hugged Tommy tightly again before leaving the hospital. "Remember, Tommy," he said, his voice steady and firm, "you have the power to make a difference. Use your voice, just as I did yesterday. We can inspire change together." As Frank stepped outside, the sun was beginning to set, casting a warm glow over the city. He walked to his car, feeling a sense of fulfillment that had eluded him for far too long. The world was full of challenges, but with every small act of courage, they could spark change. That night, as Frank prepared dinner in his small kitchen, he couldn't shake the feeling of excitement. The idea of a community event was taking root in his mind, and he started jotting down ideas for how to make it happen. He wanted to reach out to local veterans organizations, schools, and community leaders to gather support and ensure that the event would resonate with everyone. After dinner, Frank settled into his favorite armchair, a blanket draped over his legs, and turned on the television. The news reported on various stories, local events, community struggles, and uplifting tales of triumph. But Frank's mind drifted away from the screen, focusing instead on his plans for the upcoming event. He envisioned a day filled with hope, laughter, and healing, a gathering where stories would be shared and connections would be forged. As he closed his eyes, he imagined the faces of the people he would invite, the smiles, and the shared experiences that would bring them closer together. He envisioned the young boy from the diner, inspired by his actions, sharing his own story of bravery. Frank knew that these connections would ripple through the community, encouraging others to step up and stand tall. With a newfound determination, Frank drifted off to sleep that night, dreaming of a gathering that would ignite a spark of courage in the hearts of many. The battles he had faced throughout his life were far from over, but now he had a new mission, one that would carry on his legacy of bravery and compassion for generations to come. The gathering. Days turned into weeks as Frank and Tommy busily planned the community event. They named it Courage in the Community, a day of stories, believing it would resonate with everyone. Flyers were designed, social media posts crafted, and local news stations were contacted to spread the word. Frank's heart swelled with pride each time he thought about the impact this gathering could have. It wasn't just a chance to share his story. It was an opportunity for the entire community to come together, confront their challenges, and inspire one another. As the day of the event approached, Frank felt a mixture of excitement and anxiety. Would people show up? Would they feel empowered to share their stories? Each night, he sat in his armchair, reflecting on his experiences and the lessons he wanted to impart. He wanted to remind everyone, especially the younger generation, that standing up against bullying wasn't just a single act. It was a lifelong commitment to integrity and courage. Finally, the day of the event arrived, and the morning sun bathed the town in golden light. Frank donned his veteran's cap, pinning the silver star to the front. He could feel the energy building within him, a potent mix of nerves and anticipation. Tawny picked him up, and together they drove to the community center, which had been transformed into a hub of activity. When they arrived, Frank was amazed by the turnout. The parking lot was full of cars, and as they stepped inside, he saw tables set up, each one decorated with colorful banners and inspirational quotes about courage and resilience. Volunteers were busy arranging chairs, setting up a microphone, and ensuring everything was ready for the speakers who would share their stories. "Look at all these people," Tawny exclaimed, his eyes wide with excitement. "This is going to be amazing, Grandpa." As they helped set up, the community center buzzed with laughter and conversation. Families arrived with their children, veterans exchanged stories, and newcomers mingled with seasoned residents. Frank moved through the crowd, greeting familiar faces and meeting new ones. There was a sense of unity that filled the air, a shared understanding that everyone had their battles to face. As the clock struck 2, Tommy took to the stage, welcoming everyone with an infectious smile. "Thank you all for being here today for courage in the community. We are thrilled to see so many faces, all gathered to share and hear inspiring stories." Frank stood at the back, feeling a swell of pride as he watched his grandson speak with such passion. Today is about more than just sharing our stories. It's about connection, healing, and inspiring each other to stand up against bullying and injustice. We believe that every story matters, and together we can make a difference. After Tawny finished his introduction, he invited Frank to join him on stage. As Frank walked up, the applause grew louder, and he felt a rush of gratitude wash over him. He stood at the microphone, looking out at the audience, and his heart swelled with emotion. "Thank you all for being here today," Frank began, his voice steady but filled with warmth. "When I fought in Korea, I learned that courage comes in many forms. It's not just about physical strength. It's about standing up for what's right, no matter how difficult it may be." He recounted the story of the bikers, his voice resonating with the audience as he described the fearlessness that comes from a lifetime of experience. Frank emphasized that everyone, regardless of age or background, could find their courage in everyday situations. When we stand together, we become stronger. We can lift each other up and ensure that no one feels alone in their struggles. After Frank's speech, he opened the floor to others who wanted to share their stories. The first to step up was a middle-aged woman named Linda, who spoke about her experiences with bullying in school. As she recounted her journey of overcoming the pain and finding her voice, the room fell silent, the weight of her words sinking in. Frank watched as tears glistened in the eyes of several listeners, touched by her vulnerability and strength. Next, a young boy named Ethan stood up. "I saw what happened to Mr. Harrison at the diner," he said, his voice shaky but determined. "I wanted to be brave like him. I used to get bullied at school, but after seeing him stand up to those bikers, I started to tell my friends to stop. It was scary, but I felt strong." The audience erupted in applause, the air charged with encouragement. Frank felt a sense of fulfillment that he had never experienced before, knowing that his actions had sparked something within these young hearts. As more people shared their stories, stories of resilience, of standing up against injustice, and of community support, the atmosphere in the room grew electric. Frank saw the ripple effect of courage spreading, igniting inspiration in each person present. There were laughter and tears, heartfelt applause, and an undeniable bond forming among everyone in the room. Halfway through the event, Rosie arrived, her eyes shining with pride. She had brought her famous apple pies to share with everyone. "I couldn't miss this," she exclaimed, setting up a table filled with pie slices. Everyone deserves a sweet treat after sharing such powerful stories. The audience cheered as Rosie handed out the slices, and soon laughter filled the air again, the mood lightening as they enjoyed her homemade delights. Frank mingled with the guests, sharing his favorite stories about the pies and the history of the diner. Each slice served as a reminder of the strength and resilience of their community. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow through the windows, Tommy stepped back onto the stage. "Thank you all for sharing today. We're going to wrap up with one final story, my grandpa's. He has inspired so many of us with his bravery, and I know he has more to share." Frank felt a mix of surprise and warmth as he was called back to the stage. He took a deep breath, collecting his thoughts. "Thank you, Tommy. I want to share something with you all that I've learned throughout my life. No matter what life throws at you, always choose kindness. You never know the impact your words and actions can have on someone else. We may not be able to change the world overnight, but we can change one person's world. And that's a start." The audience erupted into applause, many standing in appreciation of his words. Frank's heart swelled with pride. He had wanted to make a difference, and now he could see it happening right in front of him. As the event drew to a close, Frank felt overwhelmed by the love and support that filled the community center. People approached him, thanking him for his bravery and for inspiring them to stand up for themselves and others. Frank realized that this event was not just a one-time gathering. It was the beginning of something much larger, a movement toward courage, kindness, and community support. As families began to leave, Frank stood at the entrance, hugging those who had shared their stories, offering words of encouragement and love. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm golden light over the parking lot as laughter echoed through the night air. Finally, as the last of the attendees departed, Tommy turned to Frank, a grin plastered on his face. "We did it, Grandpa. That was amazing. You're a legend." Frank chuckled, feeling the warmth of the moment envelop him. "It wasn't just me, Tommy. It was all of us. Together, we can create a community where everyone feels safe and empowered." As they packed up the leftover pies and chairs, Frank's heart swelled with hope. They had set the stage for something beautiful, a gathering that would resonate for years to come. As they drove home, Frank couldn't help but feel that the spirit of courage they had ignited would continue to shine brightly in their town, inspiring others to stand up, share their stories, and foster a community where everyone's voice was heard. That night, as Frank settled into bed, he reflected on the day's events. He felt a sense of fulfillment, knowing that he had not only shared his experiences, but had also encouraged others to do the same. He drifted off to sleep with a smile on his face, excited for the adventures and challenges that awaited them in the future. The battle against bullying was far from over, but he knew that together, they could face it all with strength and courage. New horizons. In the weeks that followed the courage in the community event, Frank and Tommy noticed a tangible shift in their town. The stories shared during the gathering had sparked conversations everywhere. From schools to workplaces, parks to cafes, more residents began to speak out against bullying, and there was a renewed sense of camaraderie and support among community members. Frank felt a sense of pride as he witnessed the positive changes around him. One afternoon, as Frank was tidying up his garage, he found a dusty box filled with memorabilia from his time in the military. Inside were old letters, photographs, and medals that he hadn't looked at in years. He pulled out a framed picture of his squad taken during happier days, their smiles bright against the backdrop of a serene landscape. As he held the photo, memories flooded back. The friendships forged, the challenges faced, and the loyalty that defined their bond. It was then that Frank realized he could do more. The success of the community event had shown him that sharing stories not only inspired others, but also healed old wounds. With each story, he believed they could build stronger connections and encourage more people to embrace their courage. "Tawny," he called out, hoping his grandson was nearby. "Come help me with something." Tommy appeared a moment later, curiosity lighting up his face. "What's up, Grandpa?" "I found some old military memorabilia," Frank said, gesturing to the box on the workbench. "I think we should do something special with it. I want to honor my friends from the war and show the community that our experiences can help others." Tommy nodded enthusiastically. "That's a great idea. What are you thinking?" "I want to organize a memorial event," Frank suggested, his voice steady with conviction. "A chance for veterans to share their stories and for the community to understand the sacrifices made for their freedom. We could invite local schools to participate, so the younger generation learns about history and the importance of respect and bravery." Tommy's eyes lit up. "We can even include interactive sessions where kids can ask questions and veterans can share what they learned from their service." Together, they brainstormed ideas for the event, which they named Honoring Heroes, a day of remembrance and learning. They envisioned a day filled with speakers, storytelling sessions, and interactive booths where children could learn about military history and the sacrifices made by veterans. Frank wanted this event to emphasize the importance of courage, respect, and standing up for what is right, echoing the themes from their previous gathering. As they started planning, they reached out to local veterans organizations, schools, and community centers for support. The response was overwhelmingly positive. Veterans were eager to share their experiences, schools wanted to engage their students, and local businesses offered to sponsor the event. On the day of the Honoring Heroes event, the community center was bustling with activity. The atmosphere was vibrant, filled with laughter and conversations as families arrived to honor the sacrifices of the veterans. Frank wore his veteran's cap proudly, the silver star gleaming in the sunlight. He felt a mix of nerves and excitement as he prepared to share his own story. Tommy took the stage to introduce the event, his voice resonating with enthusiasm. "Welcome, everyone, to Honoring Heroes. Today, we gather to celebrate the bravery of our veterans and to learn from their experiences. This event is not just about the past. It's about shaping our future together." As the day unfolded, veterans took turns sharing their stories. Some spoke of the harrowing experiences they faced in combat, while others shared lighter anecdotes from their time in service. Frank listened intently, each story intertwining with his own memories, reinforcing the values of courage, loyalty, and the importance of standing together. When it was finally Frank's turn to speak, he felt a surge of determination. He stepped up to the microphone, scanning the audience filled with eager faces, young and old alike. "Thank you all for being here today. It means the world to us veterans to know that our stories matter." He shared his journey, from the challenges he faced as a young soldier in Korea to the friendships he formed and the lessons learned in the most difficult times. He spoke of loyalty, honor, and the importance of standing up against injustice, recalling the bikers at Rosie's Diner as a reflection of the broader fight against bullying. "I fought not just for my freedom, but for yours as well," Frank said, his voice steady and firm. "Every one of us has a responsibility to stand up for one another, to create a world where kindness and courage prevail over hate and bullying." As he concluded, the audience erupted into applause. Frank felt a wave of appreciation wash over him. This was what he had hoped for: connection, understanding, and a shared commitment to stand up for what is right. Throughout the day, the interactive booths proved to be a hit, especially among the younger attendees. They engaged with veterans, asking questions and learning about the history of their service. Frank watched with pride as children listened intently, their eyes wide with curiosity. At one booth, a young girl named Emma, no older than 10, approached a veteran named Bill. "What was it like to be a soldier?" she asked, her voice filled with genuine curiosity. Bill smiled warmly. "It was tough at times, but it also taught me the value of teamwork and friendship. We had each other's backs, no matter what." Emma's eyes sparkled with excitement. "Did you ever get scared?" "Absolutely," Bill replied honestly. "But courage isn't the absence of fear. It's about facing that fear and doing what's right anyway." Frank felt a swell of emotion as he watched the interaction. Moments like these, where stories were shared and lessons were learned, were the true essence of the event. It wasn't just about honoring the past, it was about shaping the future and empowering the next generation to carry the torch of bravery forward. As the day drew to a close, Frank gathered with Tommy and the other veterans. They shared laughs and stories, reminiscing about their experiences and reflecting on the impact of the event. Frank felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that they had created a space for healing and understanding. Later that evening, as Frank returned home, he felt a wave of gratitude wash over him. He knew that their community was stronger than ever, united by the stories they had shared and the courage they had inspired. Sitting in his armchair, he reflected on how far they had come since that fateful day at the diner. The laughter of children, the camaraderie of veterans, and the collective determination to stand up against bullying had transformed their town into a haven of support and kindness. In the following days, stories from the Honoring Heroes event began to circulate through local newspapers and social media. People shared photos, quotes, and reflections, igniting discussions about courage, respect, and the importance of standing up for one another. Frank and Tommy received numerous messages from attendees expressing gratitude for the event and sharing their own stories of bravery and resilience. With the success of the event still fresh in their minds, Frank and Tommy began to brainstorm their next steps. They decided to establish a monthly community gathering where residents could come together, share their experiences, and learn from one another. It would be a platform for stories of struggles, victories, and everything in between, where the focus would always be on building a supportive community. As they planned, Frank found himself filled with excitement for what lay ahead. This was a new chapter, one that allowed him to pass on the torch of courage to the next generation. He knew that with each story shared, they could continue to build a legacy of kindness and strength that would resonate throughout their community for years to come. That night, as Frank drifted off to sleep, he felt a profound sense of peace. He had faced many battles in his life, but this, creating a community that valued courage and kindness, was perhaps the most important fight of all. And he was ready to face it, alongside his grandson, and all those who dared to stand up and share their stories. A legacy of courage. The following weeks flew by in a whirlwind of excitement and planning. Frank and Tommy dedicated their evenings to organizing the first monthly gathering, aptly named Voices of Courage, a community conversation. The aim was to foster a safe space where individuals could come together, share their stories, and support one another. Each month would feature a different theme, starting with Courage in the Face of Adversity, a perfect follow-up to the recent events. As the day approached, word spread through the community. Flyers adorned local bulletin boards, social media buzzed with anticipation, and families began to RSVP, eager to participate. Frank felt a mix of nerves and exhilaration as he prepared to share the news with his friends at Rosie's Diner. On a bright Saturday morning, Frank walked into Rosie's, greeted by the familiar aroma of freshly brewed coffee and sizzling bacon. The diner was bustling, filled with patrons enjoying their meals and catching up on the latest gossip. Frank spotted Rosie behind the counter, expertly flipping pancakes while chatting with a regular. "Good morning, Rosie," he called out, making his way to the counter. "Frank, you're just in time for the best pancakes in town," Rosie replied, flashing a warm smile. "What's new with you?" Frank settled onto a stool, excitement bubbling inside him. "I wanted to let you know about our upcoming event, Voices of Courage. We're inviting the community to share their stories and connect with one another. It's all about fostering understanding and support." Rosie's eyes lit up. "That sounds fantastic. I'd love to help in any way I can. You know I'm all about supporting the community. Actually, we'd love for you to host a story booth at the event," Frank suggested. "You can encourage patrons to share their experiences while enjoying some of your delicious pie." "That's a wonderful idea. I'll bring my best pies and set up a cozy space for everyone to sit and share," Rosie replied enthusiastically. As they continued to discuss the details, several patrons overheard their conversation. Curious, a middle-aged man named David approached the counter. "Did I hear you say something about sharing stories?" he asked, leaning in. Frank nodded. "Yes, we're hosting a community gathering where everyone can share their experiences and learn from one another. It's important for us to connect and support each other." David smiled, his expression shifting from curiosity to eagerness. "I'd love to participate. I have a story that I think might resonate with others." As the conversation continued, more people chimed in, expressing their willingness to contribute to the event. Frank felt a sense of camaraderie filling the diner, reinforcing the idea that they were all in this together. Over the next few weeks, the excitement around Voices of Courage grew. The event was set for the first weekend of the month, and as the day drew near, Frank and Tommy received an overwhelming number of RSVPs. It was clear that the community was ready to engage, to share, and to learn from one another. On the day of the event, the community center buzzed with energy. Frank arrived early, helping to set up chairs and prepare the space for the story booth. He felt a wave of nostalgia wash over him, remembering the countless gatherings and events he had attended over the years, each one leaving a mark on his heart. As the clock struck 2, the event began. Tommy welcomed everyone, his voice resonating with enthusiasm. "Thank you all for joining us today for Voices of Courage. We're here to celebrate the strength of our community and to share our stories of resilience." Frank watched as faces lit up with excitement. The atmosphere was electric, a tangible sense of anticipation filling the air. One by one, participants stepped up to share their experiences, weaving a tapestry of stories that highlighted the common threads of courage and resilience. A woman named Karen spoke first, recounting her battle with cancer and the support she found in her community during treatment. "I realized that true strength lies not just in enduring the fight, but in allowing others to support you through it," she said, her voice steady. "I wouldn't be here today without the love of my friends and family." As she finished, applause erupted throughout the room, and Frank felt the warmth of connection blossoming among everyone present. One story after another unfolded, creating an environment of shared vulnerability and strength. Next, a teenage boy named Marcus took the microphone. "I was bullied in school for being different," he began, his voice wavering but filled with determination. "But I learned to embrace who I am and stand up for myself. It was tough, but with the support of my friends, I found my courage." Frank watched as Marcus spoke, feeling a surge of pride for the young man's bravery. The audience responded with cheers and applause, reinforcing the message that everyone's story mattered. As the afternoon progressed, Frank felt a deep sense of fulfillment wash over him. The stories shared were not just individual experiences, they were the collective heartbeat of the community, echoing the values of kindness, compassion, and resilience. Finally, it was Frank's turn to speak. He stepped up to the microphone, his heart swelling with pride as he faced the audience. "Thank you all for sharing your incredible stories today. Each one of you has shown us the power of courage and the importance of standing up for ourselves and one another." He paused, taking a deep breath as he reflected on the journeys he had witnessed. "Throughout my life, I've learned that our experiences shape us, but it's our choices that define who we are. We must choose to be kind, to support each other, and to stand tall in the face of adversity." The room was silent as Frank continued. "As we leave here today, I urge you all to take these stories with you. Share them, remember them, and let them inspire you to be a source of strength for someone else. Together, we can create a community where no one feels alone in their struggles." When he finished speaking, the audience erupted into applause, the energy in the room palpable. Frank felt a mix of emotions, gratitude, pride, and hope. This was not just an event. It was the beginning of something far greater. As the event wrapped up, attendees began to mingle, sharing their thoughts and feelings about what they had experienced. Frank noticed a group of children gathered around the story booth, eagerly listening to Rosie as she encouraged them to share their own stories. "Every story matters, no matter how small," she said, her voice gentle and inviting. "You never know how your words can inspire someone else." Frank smiled as he watched the next generation embracing the spirit of courage and connection. This was the legacy he wanted to leave behind, a community where everyone felt empowered to share their stories and support one another. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the community center, Frank felt a sense of peace envelop him. They had created a space for healing, understanding, and connection, and he was grateful to be a part of it. That night, as Frank settled into bed, he reflected on the day's events. He felt a profound sense of accomplishment, knowing that he had played a role in building something meaningful. The Voices of Courage event was just the first step, and he was excited for the future. In the days that followed, Frank and Tawny continued to build on the momentum of their gatherings. Each month brought new stories, new voices, and new connections. They invited veterans from nearby towns, engaged local schools, and encouraged community members to bring their friends and families. Frank's heart swelled with pride as he witnessed the community coming together, united by their shared experiences. The gatherings were not just about sharing stories. They became a celebration of resilience, compassion, and the power of human connection. As the seasons changed and the first snowfall blanketed their town, Frank looked out the window with a smile. The legacy he had built alongside Tawny and the community was thriving. He knew that by sharing their stories, they were creating a ripple effect that would inspire others to stand up and share their own experiences. And so, with each gathering, Frank Harrison continued to pass on the torch of courage, ensuring that the spirit of bravery and kindness would live on, lighting the way for generations to come. The battles they fought would never be forgotten, and the bonds they formed would remain unbreakable. In a world that often felt divided, they had created a place where stories were shared, voices were heard, and courage was celebrated.